President, please be seated. The court is now in session, and the floor is given to the co-prosecutors to resume the questioning. The chamber would like to inform the co-prosecutors and the lead co-lawyers that you still have one more session remaining.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Witness, before the break, we were discussing Doik Superior, and I think you told us that you understood Doik Superior to be Son Sen, at least initially, and then at some point, Son Sen was called away to oversee the battle with Vietnamese forces in the east. I want to ask you about something you said in one of your investigative statements about this, and the reference for this is E3/5155. The English ERN is 00161591, Khmer 00146638, and French 00148083. And this is what you said, quote, Ta Son Sen, formerly he was in charge above Ta Doik. Later on, Ta Q disappeared. I don't know about any others. I knew because I saw him come once during 1977, because I asked him to go to the army, but afterwards I never saw him come again. And then the question was, do you know when Son Sen disappeared? And you said, I know it was 1977 when he came once to teach. I never saw him after that, unquote. So my first question about this, in what you said, you refer to someone called Son Sen, and you also refer to someone called Ta Q. Are those the same people or are those different people?
Let me inform you that the Deutsch addressed Sun Sen by the name Takio, and he said Takio was Sun Sen.
And the other thing I'm interested in is this language, Takyu disappeared. Why did you say that Takyu disappeared?
I met him in a training session in 1977. Sun Sen, came in 1977, and later on, he no longer came to train us since he went to the battlefield to fight against the Vietnamese. However, although he was there away, he was still in charge. He was still the superior of Duc.
And why do you say that when he was away, he was still the superior of Duc? What do you base that on?
Allow me to inform you that Duc did not make any announcement that there was another individual besides Sun Sen who was his superior.
I want to ask you about that, and I want to ask you specifically, did you ever hear a reference to brother number 1 or brother number 2 during your time at S21?
The Deutsche called brother number 1 brother number 2. Brother number 1 was Pol Pot, and brother number 2 was Nuon Chia.
And what do you remember Tadoik saying about brother number 2 during the time you were at S21?
He said nothing else. That was the names which were widely known. I mean, brother number 1, number 2, and I addressed and I used the name accordingly.
Right, but I'd like you to focus on your time at S21. Did you hear Tadoik use the names brother number 1 and brother number 2? And if so, in what context and what did he say?
During the time that we were invited to a training session, he was referring to brothers 1 and 2.
I want to ask you about something another witness has said about Doik talking about brothers number 1 and 2 at training sessions. This is from the transcript of 27 April, just after 10:57 in the morning. So this witness is Prak Kon, who was an interrogator at S21, and in his testimony here, he was asked the following, quote, "During those training sessions, or those meetings which were held twice a month or once a month, did Doik ever tell you who were his immediate superiors to whom he reported or to whom he was accountable?" Answer. So this is Prak Kon's answer. "He never told us the specific names of his superiors. He simply referred to those superior as brother number 1 and brother number 2. Question. And what did he say regarding brothers number 1 and number 2? Did he talk about them often? If yes, what did he tell you about them? Answer. Talking about brother number 1 and number 2, he talked about the reports that he sent to the 2 brothers, whether the 2 brothers accepted it or rejected it," unquote. So does that refresh your memory in these training sessions that you attended where Doik mentioned brother number 1 and brother number 2? Does that refresh your memory that he in fact referred to brothers number 1 and 2 as his superiors?
Addressing or referring to brothers number 1 and 2, he did make a mention about brothers number 1 and number 2. However, interrogators, they had different roles to play, and I had my own role to perform, and at the time I did not know whether he said there were other individuals who were his superiors.
And I'll just ask one more question on this point so we can get it as clearly as possible. You've said that Tadoik mentioned brother number 1, brother number 2 in these meetings. Can you remember him ever referring to brothers number 1 and number 2 as his superiors, or is that something that you do not have a memory of?
I did not hear him say that the 2 brothers were his superiors. He only made a mention that brothers number 1 and number 2 were Pol Pot and Nuon Chia, respectively. Perhaps there were meetings of interrogators with Duik and Peng. I only heard Duik mentioned brothers number 1 and 2 only.
And again, just to be clear, you've just said that he identified brother number 1 as Pol Pot and brother number 2 as Nguyen Chia. Is that something that you heard Duik say during the time you were working at S21?
When I was working at S21, there was one time I was invited. I mean, all of us were invited to a training session south to Duke's house.
Right, but the connection between the title brother number 2 and the name Nguyen Chia, is that something that Duik told you during the DK period? In other words, is that something that you learned while you were working at S21 and not something you learned later?
Let me clarify that I learned it in the time when I was working at S21. During the training sessions presided over by Doja, he identified brothers number 1 and 2 as Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia respectively.
Okay, on another topic, can you tell me whether you have ever heard any references to Office 870 during the time that you were at S21?
I heard Deutsch say Office 870, but I myself do not know where Office 870 was and who supervised this office.
What did you hear Deutsch say about Office 870?
He mentioned of Office 870 in the training sessions.
Are you able to recall what he said about it, what the context was? Why did he mention Office 870?
I did not know.
Multiple training sessions.
He mentioned the name and also the number, as I said, in every training session.
And given that he mentioned it in every training session, can I just ask you to try once again to remember what it was that he said about it?
He did not expand further on that office. He mentioned brothers 1 and 2 and Office 870. He did not go on to explain about 870.
And I'll just try one more time. When he mentioned it, did he mention it as a source of supplies? Did he mention it as a source of instructions or orders? Did he mention it being responsible for some particular aspect of things?
I don't know on this particular issue. It was not my responsibility at the time. It was his responsibility.
Okay, thank you for answering my questions, Mr. Witness. Mr. President, with the Chamber's leave, I'll hand the floor to my colleagues for the civil parties.
President, you may proceed now. Lead co-lawyers for civil party, you can put question now to this witness.
បាទសូមអរគុណលោកប្រធានសូមគោរពលោកប្រធាន
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honors. Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honors. Good afternoon, everyone in and around the courtroom, and also good morning to the public. My name is Pech Ong, and I am the co-lead lawyer for civil parties together with Mary Giro. I have a question to put to you, Mr. Witness. First, it is about the time when you started working at S21. Can you tell the court when you started working at S21 and in which specific location you were working at the time?
បាទខ្ញុំសូម
Answer. I do not recall when exactly, but what I can recall is that I was sent to Torslang in 1976. Question, was that the time when the Torslang just started its operation? Answer. The Dutch and Dutch group had been there for long. He was located in the west, and members of 703 were borrowed and sent to Torslang to organize and arrange that location. Lawyer, you stated that you were a guard at a gate close to the current beehive radio station, and you were there to receive prisoners who were sent in addition to other tasks you performed at the time. Can you tell the court, if you know, how many gates there were at S21? Answer. There were many entrances or gates. The north and west gates were closed, and only the gates that I was standing guard was allow people to go in and out. President, lawyer rather. So you would know who went in and out of the compound through the gates. Is that correct? Answer. There was one open gate in the east. However, I did not know all the people went in and out, go in and out of the compound. Sometimes some vehicles could enter the compound of that location, and Ho came to blame us why there was no one guarding the gate and allow the vehicles to come in. Question, did that happen on the one specific occasion only, when the vehicles could go directly into the compound? Answer. It was our negligence at the time, since we were busy with raising and feeding the animals, poultry rather, and on those several occasions we were careless and allowed the vehicles to go inside. Lawyer, well, those vehicles belongs to S21, and were those vehicles transporting prisoners into the compound? And what time of the day did that happen? Was it during the daytime or nighttime? Answer. It happened during the daytime. Those vehicles came into the compound. It happened at around between the 10 or 12 p.m. Lawyer, what about during the night time? Answer, it did not happen at night time, since at night time we were on guard duty. Lawyer, I am now asking about the vehicles belong to other regions which transported the people into that location. You were mostly guarding the gate. How often did you see the vehicles from the outside that were not belong to S21 came into that compound? Did it happen once a day, once in 2 days, and how often did it happen? Answer, there were vehicles belong to Division 310 and North Zone. And sometimes those vehicles were from 170 from the east. Again, there were vehicles from 703. Question. You stated a while ago there were different vehicles coming into that location. Did you see other vehicles beside those you mentioned? Or were those vehicles the same one you saw every time? Answer, I noticed there were different vehicles from different locations, but the vehicles from Division 703 were the same ones. Lawyer, could you tell the court, was there any time when a large convoy came into the compound? For example, you state that there were vehicles from 310 and it came in a large group. So when did that happen? Answer, I cannot recall when it happened. Those vehicles would came to the compound 1 or 2 times per day, and sometimes it happened once in every 5 or 6 days. Question, can you tell the court where was Division 310's headquarters? Answer, I do not know. Question, did you happen to see vehicles from the north and the east? Were specific types of vehicles used by those zones? Answer, Chinese-made vehicles were used, or four-wheel drive trucks were used by the east. Sometimes there were American-made trucks used by that zone. Question, could you estimate how many people fit into one vehicle, or could you tell the court how many people transported per time in those vehicles? Answer, for American four-wheel drive and Chinese-made trucks, those trucks could fit 10 to 20 people. Lawyer, thank you. What about S21 vehicles? What type of vehicles did S21 own, and what were the type of those vehicles? Answer. S21 had five vehicles, two Land Rovers, one Chinese made vehicles, and another two vehicles. And usually the Range Rover went out to transport people. Question: how many people can those vehicles fit in? Answer: 10 people could be transported in the one Land Rover. Lawyer, thank you. When transporting people into S21, how many security guards went on the vehicles to go and collect people into S21? Answer: for the case of Battambang, the two Land Rovers went out to collect people. And one Land Rover was used by the guards for protection, and there were two people in the cabin and two guards at the back on another Land Rover. Question: when they reach Battambang, did they go to collect people from other areas beside Battambang? Answer: they went to bring people in a school in Battambang province. Those people had been arrested, and when the vehicles arrived, people were brought onto the vehicle, and the school was closed. After that, the vehicles left. Question: was there any other occasion that S21 vehicles were sent out to collect other people from other areas beside the Battambang? Answer: they were sent out to go and get people from Svay Rieng and from warehouses of the state institutions. Lawyer, can you tell the court about the locations of warehouses of the state institutions you have just mentioned? Were they located in Phnom Penh or in provinces? Answer: they were in Phnom Penh. Question: was there any occasion that S21 vehicles went out to collect and bring in workers or garment workers or mechanics at Orusai? Answer: I do not recall it. Sometime I went to receive people with the hall, and on some other occasion, other people went with him. Lawyer, thank you, Mr. Witness. I have a last set of questions in relation to the transportation of people to Chương Ek by Chương Ek vehicles. Were groups divided in order to go and bring people to Chiang Ai. In fact, people were brought from S21 to Chiang Ai. Lawyer, I am asking about the time when the vehicles were sent out to collect people outside of S21 in order to bring them in S21. Witness, could you clarify your question? I cannot really get it, lawyer. You stated that sometime you went out to collect and bring people outside by using S21 vehicles. These people were needed for detention at S21. Sometimes you went with her. For the group, for example, you who was part of the group were sent out to collect people from outside. Were those groups divided into specific group for specific assignments? Answer. Security guard from the in compound together with the guards at the outside the compound were sent out to guard people who were to be loaded up onto the vehicles.
Question. Can I say that there were no specific groups which were assigned to go to bring people in? Is that correct? Answer, yes, that is correct. We worked as a bigger group because sometimes there were shortages of staff or guard working at the outer part of the compound. Question. When people were brought in, let's say from Battambang or Svay Rieng into S21, was there anyone among you who went to transport those people, told the prisoners about their rights, for example, the rights to speak, the rights to certain freedom? Did any of you actually tell prisoners of their rights? And no one said anything. And while they were in the vehicles, they were told to keep quiet. Question. Since you yourself involved directly in this activity, did you ever notice that prisoners talked to one another when they were arrested or when they were being transported to S21? Answer, no, there was none. Question. And did you observe the condition of the prisoners? Whether they were scared when they were arrested? Answer. Of course, prisoners were in a fear state, as some of their bodies shook. Question. Did any of the guards in the vehicles with prisoners during transportation? That is between the point they were arrested and S21. Answer. There was a strict rule that we should not do anything to the prisoner during the transportation, and that they should be transported safely to S21 for the purpose of interrogation. Question. While prisoners were en route from Battambang and Svay Rieng, Did any of the prisoner ever mention that they were exhausted or they requested for water to drink or something like that? And if so, did you provide food or water to such prisoners? Answer. While en route, none of them ever demanded water or food, since we were all in a hurry to reach our destination. Question. You said that some other prisoners had their family members and children to accompany them. And if there is a case, can you tell the chamber whether those children cried while they were being transported in vehicles? Answer. I never myself encountered those with the children or family. Other guards did. Question. I'd like now to move to another subject. You were a guard at S21, or that you were the one who were among those guards who sent prisoners from S21 to Preso? Can you tell the chamber how frequent were the vehicles used to transport prisoners from GNA, from S21 to GNA? Answer. It varied depending on how many confessions, how many integrations were concluded.
I think something went wrong in the translation, because the question was about, if I understood correctly, from S21 to Prey Sar, but the translation got back from S21 to Chiang Ek.
But I'd like to ask the witness about sending people from S21 to GNA, since he was a guard at the main entrance of S21. Maybe I made a mistake on my end, or maybe there is a mistake in the interpretation. Allow me to continue. Regarding the training conducted for S21 guards, or for that matter, other staff who were working in the same capacity as you, what kind of trainings did you receive? Answer. All of us were required to attend training. We were told that we were the children of Angkar and that we had to keep up with the wheel of the history, and anyone who was arrested by Angkar deemed to be the enemy of Angkar. Question. Did you receive any training that what you should do, or whether you should inform a prisoner about their rights, that you have to respect their rights? Were you taught this aspect either from Ho, from Dutch, or from Son Sen? Answer. As I have stated, prisoners who were brought in did not have any right, since they were accused of being enemy, so their rights were forfeited. Question. Can I then conclude that is it right that upon the training conducted by Ho Son Sen or Doi at S21, you were never taught about the way to respect the rights of prisoners. And that not only applied to me but applied to everyone else, since anyone who was arrested was considered an enemy, so they did not have any right. If any of us actually gave certain rights to a prisoner, and if it was known, then we would be in trouble. Question: if there is a case, then was there such a cases that anyone who actually respected the right of the prisoners and they ran into trouble? And I did not know about that, since I was a guard at the outer part. However, if anyone paid closer care or attention to prisoners, would be subject to be under monitoring. If anyone stole rice or food, the person will be arrested and imprisoned. Question: in your capacity as a security guard at S21, did you engage in any physical training exercise, for example, in karate or in such self-defense? And Taho actually taught us karate, and I was amongst the trainees. However, one day I was hit in my mouth, and from that day onward I stopped doing that. Question: can you tell the chamber why it was necessary for security guards like yourself or other guards to receive karate training at S21? Answer: Taho was the karate instructor, and that we had to attend the training in order to prepare ourselves for the arrest of prisoners. Question: so the training was for you to effectively engage in your duty? Answer: yes. The training was for us not to allow the prisoners to protest or to counterattack us. Question: thank you. Before I move to the topic of June 8, I'd like to put a question for clarification. Do you have responded in details to the question by the Deputy Co-Prosecutor regarding the execution of children at S21? When children were taken from the upper floor down to the ground, to the lower floor of the building at S21, and you said that before the parents were allowed were taken out, the children had already been taken out. That is to June 8. Was there any instance where the parents had been taken to June 8 and later on their children were taken from S21? Answer: no, there was no such instance. Question: can you please clarify whether there was such instance or you did not recall it? President, please, Mr. Witness, observe the microphone. Witness: children had to be taken first before the mothers were taken. Otherwise, the children would cry and make noise in the building. question. I'd like now to move on to another topic, that is chương 8, and I don't have any many questions, and my colleague will put some questions to you as well. You stated that at the chương 8, people were executed by way of striking the nape of the neck, had their throat slashed, and then they were disemboweled before they were thrown into the pit. Can you tell the chamber, or after the prisoners had been strapped in the nape of the neck and their throat slashed, why was it necessary to disembowel them and to throw them into the pits? Answer. Taho and Tadich gave instructions that after the striking of the neck, we had to slash their throat, and the purpose of the disembowelment was not to allow the body to swell so that the stink would get out. The stench would get out. Question. And can you tell the chamber, was there any instances where children or baby were brought along with their mothers from I-21 to chương 8 and later executed? Answer. When I went with those prisoners, there was no baby, and I could not say whether babies were brought along with their mothers with another group of guards. And this kind of arrangement was made by paying. Question. Again, talking about chương 8, you explains the way names were registered or written on the list. That is, for those who were killed at chương 8. Can you tell the chamber when was exactly the registration was done? Was it when the prisoners were led out from the house to the pit? Answer. When prisoners were taken out from the house, they were taken toward a place where I was there, and where there was a light bulb there and a chair, and their names would be written down there. Question. And the light bulb that you spoke about, how far was it from that location to the house? Answer. It was rather far. Question. Did you actually have a list of names and you only tick against the names, or did you have to rewrite names of prisoners? Answer. As I testified earlier, I had to write down sequential number and write down the names of prisoners anew. Question. Did you have to verify the names with the list of names sent from Tulslang? Answer. The list of names from Tulslang was with the T, and he instructed me to rewrite the names again so that he could use my list to verify with the list in his possession. Question. So the process of writing down the name that you described is a routine. For example, when people were taken out from the wooden house, you have to write down their names, and then you return to S21. Was that a routine of writing down the names of prisoners when they were let out from that wooden house? Answer. After I wrote down their names, they were sent to be killed, and at the end I would take the list of names together with me, and I went onto the vehicle, and upon arrival at Tuoslang, I gave that list of names to Suthi. Question. Did you yourself verify that the prisoners actually had been killed and dead at the pit? Answer. No, I did not mention that. I only gave him the list of names that I wrote, and I returned to my place. Question. This may be my last question, and then my colleague will put some questions to you. You worked at S21 from 1976 to 79. Can you tell the chamber about your feeling at the time, or any regrets that you might have from your activities working in that particular location? Answer. While I was working at S21, and Son Sen came to conduct a meeting, and as I said, I was afraid that sooner or later I would be arrested and killed. In 1975, when Phnom Penh was liberated, there was an instant where a colonel was released, and later on I was brought to work at as 21, and I was rather afraid of my previous activities. For that reason, I made a request to Son Sen to return to the army, so that if I was in trouble, only myself would die and not the rest of my family members. I actually also had another plan to convince other people to rebel, but it was leaked, and that Deutsch was aware of that, and during a study session, Deutsch asked me that Ngoon actually said that I actually had a plan to rebel, but I said that no, that was nonsense. It was nothing like that. But in fact, 3 days previously, Ho, who had the key to the weapon warehouse, I actually entered the weapon warehouse to see what weapons were stored there. Deutsch was concerned about that, and he asked his driver to move those weapons to the general staff office. Later on, I was sent to work at a rice field in Chiang Ai, and later on, I was gathered to the forest. And later on, I actually gathered some of my close friends, about 20 of us, with some weapons, and we fled away from his group. Some of us actually died later on, and I became sick before I returned to my native village and survived till today. Question. When you were sent to bring people from other provinces, or from Tuoslang to Chiang Ai for execution, how did you feel? How did you feel about those victims of S21, since you were a staff member of S21 as well? President interrupts. Lawyer for civil party, that question is not appropriate. This is a witness and not a civil party, and it is not appropriate for you to ask about the harm or the feeling. The question can be put to the accused at the end during the pleading, or you may put such a question to witnesses who were the victims and civil parties, and not to the witness. So please rephrase your questions which are appropriate for witnesses. Because to me, your questions seem to be more appropriate for civil parties rather than witnesses. But, thank you, Mr. President. I conclude my session and I'd like to hand the floor to my colleague, Mary Giro. President, yes, you may proceed, Counsel.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon to all of you. Good afternoon, witness. My name is Marie Guiraud, and I'm representing with my colleague PIC, the Civil Party Collective. I have a few very brief questions, brief follow-up questions to put to you this afternoon. You said this morning to the co-prosecutor that upon 2 occasions you went to Svay Rieng to go collect detainees, prisoners. Were these people... I see that you have a problem apparently with your headset, or... Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now, witness? Well, let me please repeat my question. You said this morning that you went to Svay Rieng upon 2 occasions to go collect Vietnamese to bring them to S21. So I wanted to know if all of the people you brought to S21 upon those 2 trips, if they were all military or if there were also civilians among these Vietnamese that you brought to S21.
I did not know who were soldiers and who were not, but I learned that 5 Vietnamese soldiers were arrested and we were sent to pick them up.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the circumstances in which you went to collect the prisoners? Where did you find them exactly in Svay Rieng? Where were they? Were they already detained? How were you able to know if they were soldiers or not? What recollections do you have regarding these 2 specific trips to Svay Rieng to go collect these people of Vietnamese origin?
We went to pick them up at the south part of the provincial town office. They were being detained there. They were tied and cuffed there. So when I arrived at the place, we uncuffed them and we put our own cuff and then transported them back.
Were they wearing uniforms? How were you able to know if they were soldiers or if they were civilians?
Yes, they were wearing military uniforms with a military cap.
Une fois que vous avez amené...
Once you had brought these prisoners to S21, what was the procedure? And was the procedure different if you were dealing with Vietnamese prisoners or if you were dealing with prisoners who were not Vietnamese? Do you remember today if there were different procedures in both cases?
we sent them to the room that is at the tea room, and I left them there, and then I returned to my place.
Nous avons deux témoins.
We have two witnesses who came to testify before this chamber and who spoke about a film that apparently was made of these prisoners, of these Vietnamese military prisoners arriving at S-21. And the references are Prakan on 27 April 2016 at 15:59 spoke about this episode during which Vietnamese soldiers were exposed before buildings A and B, and this event was filmed. And we also have Lac Mien, who on 26 April 2016 at 10:49 spoke about this as well. He said that he spoke about the Vietnamese prisoners who were brought to S-21 and said that they were filmed, and then this film was shown during the training sessions to the S-21 staff. So do you remember anything about this? Do you remember anything about a film on the arrival and the confessions of the Vietnamese prisoners at S-21?
Yes, that is correct. I recall it. They were ordered to stand in a line, then their photographs were taken and they were filmed, and later on the film were shown to staff at S-21. They had some of them had their insignia on their shoulders, including a general, and some did not have any rank.
Et quels sont les souvenirs que vous avez de ce film?
What do you remember of that film? Was it only the Vietnamese prisoners who arrived at S-21 were filmed, or did you watch any other, did you receive any information during that training session? Was it only the film you watched?
After that film was made, and after they were interrogated, in fact, the film was a summary of all those processes, that is, after they were interrogated and later on executed.
Donc le film.
So the film showed the arrival of the prisoners, the interrogation of the prisoners, and subsequently the execution of the prisoners. Did I properly understand the thrust of your testimony?
That is true.
Ce film était-il spécifique?
Was that film specifically on the Vietnamese prisoners, or you saw other films involving the arrival, the interrogation, and the interrogation of other prisoners who are not Vietnamese?
I do not recall it well. That the film depicting a soldier with insignia, there is a general, and also those people were wearing military caps. And the film was also about the execution.
Et avez-vous le souvenir d'où?
And do you remember where those Vietnamese prisoners were executed? Was it at the S-21 at Choeng Ek? And is that something you remember today?
Not at Choeng Ek. Those prisoners died within Tuas line.
Je vous remercie. Je voulais vous poser.
Thank you. I would like to put to you a last series of short questions in the 5 minutes left. At the time when you're working at S21, did you hear of the issue of offerings of a moral nature? Was that a term that was used, an expression that was used at S21?
There was a young guard who raped a female prisoner. That young guard had moral often with the female prisoner, and later on he was arrested, detained, and killed.
Vous souvenez-vous le nom de ce...
Do you remember the name of that young guard?
I did not recognize that guard well, since he was working inside the compound under the supervision of Payne.
Et comment avez-vous appris cet incident? Est-ce que...
How did you learn about that incident? Is that an incident you yourself witnessed, or was it someone else who told you of that incident? Otherwise, how did you know that a young guard had raped a prisoner?
The securities inside, or perhaps Payne, told me about that. Since I was a guard outside, I was told that guards who raped prisoners were to be arrested, and that a young guard was arrested and detained.
À part cet incident dont vous parlez, avez...
Apart from that incident, do you recall other incidents and other events of that nature when you were working at S21? What I mean is, do you know of any other guards who were punished for acts committed of a moral nature, acts of a moral nature?
I do not know beside that one incident. A staff member at S21, to my recollection, was arrested and detained, and the lock did not use well at the time, and that guard could make an escape and went to Vietnam. After 1979, he worked as a police officer in Kandahar province, and currently he is deceased.
Et juste pour finir, Monsieur le Président, si vous me...
Just to wrap up my line of questioning, Mr. President, if you allow me, what were the reasons for which that guard was imprisoned? Do I understand that that person was punished for committing offenses of a moral nature?
One guard had been arrested for committing a moral offense with a female prisoner, and perhaps there was another guard who had been arrested as well for allowing a prisoner to escape out of the prison. And as for the victim of the rape, that female prisoner was also arrested and killed.
Et connaissiez-vous le nom?
And do you know the name or any other details on the victim you've referred to who was killed?
I do not know her name. That female prisoner was later on sent to be under the responsibility of another group. I was not there in charge of that case.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe I've run out of time. Thank you. Thank you, witness, for answering my questions.
President, thank you. It is now break time. The chamber will take a short break from now until 3 p.m. Court officer, please assist the witness in the waiting room during the break time, and please invite him back into the courtroom together with the duty counsel at 3 p.m.